Right in the heart of Nairobi's oldest money, there lies a hidden kingdom. We're talking about Karen. And down there, completely concealed beneath a lush green canopy, sits an empire worth over 4.3 billion shillings. It boasts a high-end restaurant, a sprawling corporate business park, and a luxury wellness sanctuary. All of it breathing inside a 20-acre virgin forest. For a decade, this place was a fortress, a sanctuary of tranquility and unbelievable wealth. But today, it is the crime scene of a ruthless corporate war. You have to ask yourself, how does one of the most powerful politicians in Kenyan history just lose a multi-billion shilling empire overnight? How do his 3 children end up on the hook for a massive debt they didn't even create? And perhaps the most chilling question of all, why would a bank deliberately refuse to take its own money back? To find the answers, we don't look at the police who broke down the gates in the dead of night. No, we look for the ghost in the machine, the invisible hand that laid the trap to begin with. We are looking for the shadow mastermind. Now, to really understand this war, you have to know the players involved. In one corner we have Raphael Tuju. He's a former cabinet secretary and the once powerful Secretary General of the Jubilee Party. In the opposing corner stands the East African Development Bank, EADB. This is a regional multilateral powerhouse, explicitly created to finance development across East Africa. The bank's public position is clinical, cold and simple. A loan was issued, the borrower defaulted, and the debt must be recovered by any means necessary. But here's where it gets interesting. Operating in total darkness is a third player. The shadow mastermind. A powerful unseen orchestrator who watched the board, laid the traps, and waited patiently for Raphael Tuju to walk perfectly into the snare. But to understand exactly how this trap was set, we need to rewind a bit. Let's go back to 2015. Raphael Tuju had a dream of expanding his footprint in Karen. And this ambition wasn't just pulled out of thin air, it grew organically from the soil he already owned. By 2015, Tuju was successfully running Dari Restaurant, a beautiful eco-park built on a 7-acre wooded plot. And sitting right next door to his thriving business was the ultimate prize, that 20-acre virgin forest on Tree Lane. The land belonged to Peter Patterson, the son of the original Scottish settler, who was actually born on that very soil back in 1940. When his father died, Peter inherited the land, but he also inherited a dying wish: protect the forest. Peter was sworn to guard the indigenous ecology, the ancient trees, the roaming wildlife, and the dense breathing flora and fauna that called it home. For decades, Peter Patterson honoured that promise. He lived there alone, quietly preserving the sanctuary, until 2013, when he finally made the difficult decision to sell. However, Patterson wasn't just looking for a buyer with deep pockets. He was looking for a custodian. He attached an ironclad, non-negotiable legal covenant to the sale. Whoever bought it had to guarantee the absolute preservation of the forest. You could not clear-cut those ancient trees for commercial real estate. You could not turn it into a high-density concrete jungle. It didn't matter how much money you had, or how high up the political ladder you reached. If you couldn't legally promise to protect that ecology, you couldn't buy the land. Now you and I know that in Nairobi, 20 acres of prime Karen real estate is like blood in the water. Naturally, the property attracted the absolute titans of the city. We're talking powerful men, deep-pocketed developers, and top-tier politicians serving in the highest ranks of President Uhuru Kenyatta. They all approached Peter Patterson, but one by one their bids were outright rejected. They completely failed to convince the elderly guardian that they wouldn't destroy his beloved forest. And it is right here, right among these rejected powerful elites, that we catch our first real scent of the shadow mastermind, a titan of the government, denied his prize, who simply refused to walk away. While the political elite failed, Raphael Tuju'S succeeded. How? In early 2014, Tuju'S approached Patterson, but he didn't come with empty promises. He came with a proven blueprint. Tuju'S simply took Patterson next door to his own 7-acre Dari business park and showed him the proof. "Look at what I have already built," Tuju'S essentially told him. "I didn't destroy the forest, I built my restaurant inside it." Tuju'S pitched a highly specific, low-impact development. He proposed building just 30 low-density retirement homes and boutique eco-villas hidden among the trees, ensuring that not a single ancient indigenous tree would be felled. Because Tuju'S actually had the eco-credentials to back up his word, Patterson trusted him. Tuju'S won the bid. But there was one massive hurdle remaining. The asking price was a staggering $9.3 million. It was money Tuju'S did not have lying around in cash. So he immediately hit the market, hunting for a financial backer to fund this mega project. And from the shadows, our mastermind, the one who had been locked out by Patterson's strict rules, saw his opening. He had just found his Trojan horse. He didn't need to convince Peter Patterson anymore. All he needed to do was orchestrate a loan for Tuju'S, let Tuju'S secure the title deed, and then spring the trap. But first, he did one thing that was very, very strategic. Walk with me. For weeks after winning the bid, Raphael Tuju'S held the golden ticket, but he didn't have the gold. He desperately needed to find investors to raise the $9.3 million. And it was during this vulnerable window that the shadow mastermind made his first direct move.
I didn't.
According to Tuju'S own public accounts, a highly influential figure, a top official serving within former President Uhuru Kenyatta's government, approached him. This was one of the very men Peter Patterson had already rejected. The official came to Tuju'S with an indecent proposal: act as my proxy. The shadow mastermind wanted Tuju'S to serve as a high-end broker. The plan was simple. Tuju'S would use his eco-friendly reputation to sign the papers with Patterson. But behind the curtain, the powerful official would be the one actually buying the land. But Tuju'S refused. He was an ambitious businessman, building his own empire, not a puppet for a cartel. He turned the powerful official away and went back to hunting for legitimate investors. Not long after Tuju'S refused to be a proxy, his phone rang. On the other end of the line was David Odongo,
Hello.
a top-tier executive at the East African Development Bank, EADB. Odongo introduced himself and delivered what sounded like a miracle. The bank was willing to fully fund Tuju'S mega project. When asked how a massive regional lender even knew he was looking for capital, Odongo claimed that a Kenyan diplomat had tipped the bank off. To a desperate developer, this sounded like a dream come true, but to an investigator, this is where the official narrative completely falls apart. Let's pause and look at the logic. Who was this mysterious, unnamed diplomat? In the cutthroat world of Nairobi finance, multilateral banks don't just cold call developers out of the blue because a diplomat whispered their name. The phantom diplomat is the smoking gun. Having failed to buy the land directly from Patterson, and having failed to bully Tuju'S into acting as a frontman, the shadow mastermind simply pivoted his strategy. They orchestrated the introduction from behind the scenes, effectively pushing the EADB toward Tuju'S. Completely unaware of the invisible hands guiding him, Raphael Tuju'S happily walked into the EADB boardrooms to negotiate his future. Sitting across from him were the ultimate architects of the deal, Vivienne Yedda, the formidable and powerful Director General of the EADB, and David Odongo. Tuju laid his cards on the table. He needed a two-phased financial lifeline, 9.3 million to officially purchase the 20-acre forest from Peter Patterson, 294 million to actually build the boutique eco-villas and retirement homes that would generate the revenue to pay the bank back. The bank executives smiled. They agreed to fund the entire vision. Then came the time to draft the official facility agreement. In corporate finance, the devil is always in the fine print. But this was no standard commercial loan designed to help a client succeed. This contract was a meticulously engineered snare, tailored to ensure that once Tuju secured the title deed, he would be mathematically and legally paralyzed. Here is exactly what the contract demanded. Clause 1. The direct transfer. The first condition was simple. Tuju would never actually touch the $9.3 million. The bank dictated that the funds would be wired directly from the EADB's account straight into the pockets of the seller, Peter Patterson. On the surface, this looked like standard banking security. In reality, it was a tactical strike to swiftly remove Patterson and his strict environmental demands from the chessboard without giving Tuju any actual control over the capital. Clause 2. The collateral capture. The moment the 9.3 million hit Patterson's account, the title deed for the 20-acre virgin forest would be transferred. But it wouldn't go to Raphael Tuju. The contract stipulated that the newly purchased land, along with Tuju's highly successful 7-acre Dari business park, would immediately be swallowed by the bank as collateral. The EADB would lock the title deeds in their vault. Tuju was buying a property he could not physically possess. Clause 3. The geographic snare. This is where the trap was truly set. The agreement authorized $294 million for construction, but it explicitly dictated where the development had to happen. The bank inserted a rigid clause demanding that the luxury villas be built on Tuju's old property situated along Mwitu Road. They legally banned him from using the construction funds on the newly acquired 20-acre forest. Clause 4. The Imperial Shield, the jurisdiction trap. Finally, the mastermind needed to ensure that when the trap snapped shut, Tuju couldn't run to the Kenyan courts, where local politics and media might expose the cartel. Buried at the bottom of the agreement was the ultimate kill switch, an exclusive jurisdiction clause. It dictated that if any dispute arose, it would not be fought in Nairobi. It would be fought 4,000 miles away, under English law, in the High Court of London. Every single clause in this agreement had a specific predatory role to play. On paper, if you casually flipped through the pages, they looked like standard commercial banking protections. But in truth, they were a perfectly synchronized setup. Raphael Tuju sat in that boardroom, signed his name on the dotted line, and genuinely believed he was executing a binding, lawful transaction to expand his empire. He didn't realize it was a trap, meticulously designed to finish him. The moment the $9.3 million was wired into Peter Patterson's account, the elderly guardian walked away, taking his strict environmental conditions with him. The cartel had successfully removed their biggest obstacle from the equation. Now there was only Raphael Tuju. If you step back and look at the board in the aftermath of that transfer, the reality is chilling. Tuju had just signed for a massive loan he never actually received. He had just purchased a 20-acre estate whose title deed he was never allowed to hold. He was a man kept entirely in the dark, surrounded by an illusion of ownership. Tuju was waiting for the bank to release the second phase of the loan, $294 million meant to actually build the luxury villas. But as a seasoned developer, Tuju made a rapid commercial assessment. The original contract dictated that he build the villas on his old property along Mwitu Road. However, standing inside the newly acquired 20-acre virgin forest on Tree Lane, the business reality was undeniable. The strategic location, the absolute quiet, and the breathtaking canopy of indigenous trees made the Tree Lane property infinitely more commercially viable. High-end buyers would pay a premium to live inside a pristine forest.
According to his sworn affidavits, Tuju'S did what any transparent businessman would do. He wrote an official letter to Vivian Yedder, the Director General of the East African Development Bank, EADB, asking for a contract review. He laid out the financial logic of shifting the construction from Mwitu Road to the newly acquired Tree Lane property. In the normal commercial world, a lender would be thrilled. A better location means faster sales, which guarantees the bank gets its money back with interest. But the EADB went completely mute. Assuming silence was a bureaucratic delay rather than a trap, Tuju'S went ahead. Using his own personal funds, he broke ground and started laying the foundation for the villas, eagerly awaiting the final $294 million disbursement. Once the foundation was set, he reached out to the bank again. "Where is the construction money?" the bank finally answered. They told him he had unilaterally altered the project location without written consent. He had breached the contract. The $294 million was permanently frozen. Tuju'S was stranded. Without the villas, there was no revenue. Without revenue, there was no way to pay back the $9.3 million. The trap had just snapped shut. Time is a predator when you are in debt. Tuju'S was given a 24-month grace period, but with the construction funds frozen, the mega project completely stalled. Eventually, the clock ran out. The default was officially triggered. But Raphael Tuju'S is a fighter. Realizing he was being suffocated, he bypassed the EADB entirely and flew to Dubai. He leveraged his international network and secured a massive financial lifeline, $10 million in cash from a private investor. It was enough to wipe the entire EADB debt off the ledger. He returned to Nairobi and placed the money on the table. You would expect any lender facing a bad debt to eagerly take the payout. Instead, the EADB refused it. They cited technicalities. They claimed they didn't want the principal cleared by a third party. They only wanted Tuju'S to pay the ballooning $6.3 million in interest. The underlying message was clear: pay the interest. Take your old 7-acre Dari business park back and forfeit the 20-acre virgin forest to us. It was in that exact moment that the veil lifted. What kind of bank refuses a $10 million cash payout? Tuju'S immediately realized he wasn't dealing with a normal financial institution. The EADB executives were just the mechanics. The shadow mastermind was pulling the strings. It was never about the money. It was always about the 20-acre land.
Yes. 900 million shillings was paid to the vendor. Like you said, it's in court documentation, so that is public record.
But you don't have to take Tuju'S word for it. The conspiracy was confirmed from the inside. Amos Okech, who was the senior investment officer in portfolio management at the EADB, at the exact time the contract was signed, stepped out of the shadows. He swore an affidavit that completely corroborated Tuju'S story. Okech went on the official record, stating that the EADB's narrative was inaccurate and prejudiced. When you have the borrower screaming it was a trap, the bank's own portfolio manager swearing it was a trap, and the bank's architect admitting to the police that the funds were withheld, the truth is undeniable. The shadow cartel was operating in the darkness, and the bank was their weapon. Having successfully engineered the default and blocked Tuju'S bailouts, the cartel was ready for the but they couldn't execute the final blow in Nairobi, where the media, the DCI, and local whistleblowers were already exposing the rot. They needed a clinical, sterile environment. They needed the final weapon buried at the bottom of the 2015 contract. In 2019, the cartel deployed its ultimate weapon, the High Court of London. They bypassed the Kenyan justice system entirely, invoked the exclusive jurisdiction clause, and dragged Raphael Tuju'S 4,000 miles away to the High Court of London. Why London? Because English commercial law is brutally straightforward. Unlike Kenyan courts, which might look at the political context or the underlying intent of a deal, the English courts operate strictly on the four corners of the paper. If a contract says you cannot change the location of the villas without written consent and you
You won't die. You won't die. No. You will not die.
We can now proceed.
Jeff, utasupport hiyo site huku? Okay, sawa.
Okay.